You know, when I went back and listened to our preseason rankings of the Central Division, a few things stood out to me. One, we were way too high on teams like Nashville and St. Louis. And two, we were way too low on teams like Dallas and, to a lesser extent, Winnipeg as well. So
you're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams.
That's a big one. That's a big one.
Yeah!
Good evening and welcome to episode 156 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. Cody Abrams and Melbourne with you for this one. We've got a new schedule, of course, for episodes every week. We're going to be releasing them on Wednesdays. So a little bit of a change, but looking forward to this new schedule and just keeping things rolling with you guys. How we doing?
Doing good. Harp had my brother and his wife their baby shower on this past Sunday in Brockville, so really excited about that, and that was a lot of fun. And now I'm back in Toronto and heading Collingwood ways after this.
Case, you're just a nomad. You're just all over the place, like
all over the country.
Yeah,
just
for sure. I have many homes and many offices.
Just all over the planet. Well, that's good, and it's neat that it's your brother and his wife now, and they've got a little one on the way, so that's always special, and family's good. I've been good, guys. I've been reading this book, Case. I know that you would particularly like this one. It's Cinema Speculation by Quentin Tarantino. And I got that for Christmas, and because I've been going to school now on the train almost 2 hours a day, I've been diving right into it, and it's been so refreshing to read something other than hockey, even though I still sneak in the odd athletic article here and there. But remind me to give you that when I'm done reading it, because if you have time, I know you would really enjoy it. I'm learning a lot about cinema, which is, again, refreshing because it's not schoolwork and it's not just hockey, so it's nice to have something a little different. But yeah, guys, other than that, doing well. Harper, how about you?
I'm good, man. Can't complain. We had an Ottawa Senators event over the weekend, so got to do another watch party. They lost against the Pittsburgh Penguins, sadly, but we got to do it at Rideau Carleton Casino, just outside of Ottawa, which was a lot of fun. And just getting back into the week here. Things are good. Can't complain.
Hey guys, there's no betting corner segment in this episode of the podcast, so I thought I would take this time to tell you a little bit about our newest sponsor, BetStamp, the line shopping app for sports bettors. Betting lines have different odds across each sportsbook, and by using the BetStamp app, you can line shop across all of those sportsbooks to ensure that you're finding the best value available on the bets that you'd probably already be making. Also, the BetStamp app allows you to track all of your verified bets across those different sportsbooks so that you can build a more credible record as a bettor, and it allows you to follow other winning BetStamp users so that you can instantly be notified of their picks. So, click the link in the description down below to download the BetStamp app today, and when you do, be sure to provide the code BOYSINTHEBOOTH when prompted to do so to let them know that we sent you. Every download really helps us out, and it helps you out as well, so we would really appreciate the support. Thanks, guys.
All right, so our main topic for this episode, of course, is going to be the Central Division as we continue our mid-season report cards. Obviously, at the time that we're doing this, all 32 teams pretty much have played around 45 games or so. So we're a little bit past the midway point of the season, but not by much. Still a ton of hockey to be played, and so we're going to be giving our mid-season grades for the Central Division teams. So, starting at the top with the first place Dallas Stars, 64 points in 49 games. They're having a fabulous season. Couldn't beat my Buffalo Sabres the other night, but hey, they're a good team. And Case, starting with you, I know that you're a fan of this team in particular, so your grade for the Dallas Stars to kick things off.
Yeah, well, I have money on them to win the Cup this year, so I better be a fan of them. I think I'm going to be giving my first A+ of the series to this team because I had them in the preseason rankings being third last in this division. I think you guys mostly agreed with that. And boy, have they changed the expectations. When I was looking back to the notes, I kind of wrote down, what version of Jamie Benn and Seguin are we going to get? Can Ottinger be the man again this year? And as long as they clean things up with Jason Robertson quick, they shouldn't be too bad. Well, Seguin and Benn have turned a corner, and they're sort of back to what we would expect for them. Seguin a little less so, but Ben is third on the team in goals and is up there on points as well. Ottinger is in the Vezina caliber again this season, but I think he's going to lose that out to a certain Bruins goaltender. And this core in general is scoring a ton and doing really well. Pavelski has continued to show that age does not matter for him whatsoever. Rupe Hintz is continuing his strong play. And man, Jason Robertson, they got that deal done, and now this guy is an absolute stud, scoring left, right, and center. I think every time I check in on that game, he's scoring. And Heiskanen on my fantasy team has been great as well. I tried to find some negatives for this team, and I couldn't find any. So A+.
I wholeheartedly agree, Case. I think, when I went back and listened to our preseason rankings of the Central Division, a few things stood out to me. One, we were way too high on teams like Nashville and St. Louis. And two, we were way too low on teams like Dallas and, to a lesser extent, Winnipeg as well. So Dallas being first place in this division right now. I believe they're tied for fourth in the NHL right now with your New Jersey Devils. It's just such a nice surprise for this team and their fans because, like we said at the start of the year, we weren't really sure what we were going to get out of this team, and it's just been a blessing this year. So, like I mentioned, tied for fourth in the NHL. Their young and old players are both playing exceptionally well this year. Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, Miro Heiskanen, Jake Ottinger. That's their new young core that's been really, really good. And then, of course, Ben and Seguin have kind of resurged as bona fide top six players. And we haven't been able to say that over the last couple seasons, maybe since Jamie Benn won the Art Ross with 87 points half a decade ago. So
McDavid has that right now.
I was going to say, I thought that was funny to bring up because McDavid literally has 88 through like 48 or something right now, which is an absolute joke. But yeah, I was looking at some stats for this team, and I can't give them anything other than an A+ right now. They have the fourth most goals for in the NHL, the sixth fewest goals against, the fifth best power play percentage, and the third best penalty kill percentage. Jake Ottinger has been their horse this year. He's had a fantastic season, and like I said, offensively, everything is just working. So there really aren't any negatives for this team, and especially when comparing them to where we projected them to finish in the standings, this has been one heck of a season for the Dallas Stars so far.
Yeah, in my mind, there's only one team in the league that can get an A+. I'm going to be really critical with that, but I'll give these guys an A. Obviously, they're a lot of fun to watch, and I think that Pete DeBoer, just a new voice behind the bench, playing a system that is really heavy on emphasizing offense, and it's really worked for them. They've got depth from top to bottom. Ottinger, I knew he would be fantastic once again this year, and a lot of trust in their younger players. Not just Robertson, Hintz, Heiskanen, but Wyatt Johnston, quietly one of the best rookies in the NHL. Ty Dellandrea is out there taking face-offs late in the third period when they're up or down by a goal. So this team is just a ton of fun to watch. They're playing with speed. They can score, and just a lot more offensively minded this year are the Dallas Stars, and I think that it's really paid off for them. And yeah, they're a lot of fun to watch. So can't give them an A+. Because again, like I said, I think there's only really one team in the league that gets an A+, but I'll give these guys an A. Top of the Central, really like the Dallas Stars.
Harp, did you give a team an A+ last week? I'm blanking now.
No one got an A+ last week, I don't think.
Well, I gave Seattle
I even had to check myself to make sure I did.
Seattle, right.
But Harper, okay, you're thinking of one team. I guess we'll have to stay tuned then for the next couple episodes. Unless it's Arizona. You are wearing the hat. Who knows? Could
his
be
third
an A+.
favorite team.
it would not be Arizona. But anyway, no, it won't be a shocker for you guys to hear who I'm giving an A+ to. But anyway, yeah. But no, Dallas gets an A.
Yeah. Okay.
Alrighty, we'll move on to the second team in this division. Just 1 point behind the Dallas Stars. Chad, you mentioned that we were very critical of the Winnipeg Jets after they didn't really change much in the offseason, but they got a new coach in Rick Bowness, and I think that he has done wonders for these guys. So Winnipeg in second in this division, 63 points in 48 games, a point behind the Stars for first in the Central. Like I mentioned, they won 2 in a row, 7-3 in their last 10. Case, your grade for the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, this is another team that I was pretty sheepish on before the beginning of this season, but they've definitely proven me wrong here, and I'm going to give them an A- because I could find some negatives about this team. Very impressed with where they are in the standings, but I don't know if it's sustainable. I think that they're a playoff team, but it's not going to be second place in this division by the end of the year. For positives, I've got to point out Josh Morrissey having an absolute career year, Norris caliber defenseman, and has been phenomenal. And the core is continuing to get it done. Last year, if you had any of these guys in fantasy, it was an absolute shit show. They were so streaky, and it was tough to watch. And that includes guys. That's Kyle Connor, that's Scheifele, that's Dubois, that's I'll even include Blake Wheeler and Lowry as well. But all of those guys are producing for them so far this season. And I mean, goaltending, you got to include that guy in their core because he's been their best player once again, and that's Hellebuck. This team's fifth, I believe, in save percentage in the league, and you know, that's a pretty easy metric to look at when you think about Connor Hellebuck. The negatives I could point out is that they have a terribly average power play, and you don't do well in the playoffs if you have a poor power play. And the last thing is they sort of lack depth. I named a pretty big core, but outside of that core, there's not really anyone producing on this team, and you can see that in where they stand for goals for.
Yeah, outside of their top six, the production drops off drastically. And I mean, we all kind of knew that going into the season, that their top six was pretty good on paper. It has been for years now, even dating back to when Patrick Laine was there, and now with PLD. Like, their top six is solid when everybody's going, but outside of their top six, there's really not a lot there. And, as you said, the goals for kind of show that. But you know what, Case? Like, I'm agreeing with you. I'm giving them an A- as well. I think that's a perfect grade because, like I said, at the start of the year, we were pretty low on the team, and we projected them to finish, or at least be a bubble team, maybe finish just outside of the playoffs or squeak in. On paper, they've always been good, but we're seeing it again this year. They've been really reliant on Connor Hellebuck, and they kind of ebb and flow with his play. And surprise, surprise, he's having another Vezina caliber season this year, so naturally the team is good again. And I'm not saying it's all on Connor Hellebuck's shoulders. Like you did mention, there are 4 guys, I believe, who are scoring over a point per game, and that doesn't even include Wheeler and Scheifele, who are right behind. So they are getting the production from their top 6, and they are getting really good goaltending. But, it is a bit scary when you look at this team, because I think they are so reliant on Connor Hellebuck to steal games, and I don't know if that's as sustainable as a team who's maybe just better structured top to bottom. But that being said, Hellebuck's having a great year. They're getting production. They're currently in a good spot right now when it comes to the playoff picture. And, I was just looking at some of the numbers, and they're pretty encouraging for this team as well so far through just under 50 games. Like, despite not getting much production outside of the top 6, they are still top 10 in goals for, and as well as goals against, meaning like they've allowed within the top 10 fewest goals against in the league. And despite having a pretty average power play, which I think, given the weapons in this lineup might come down to coaching. They have the second best penalty kill percentage in the NHL, so that's not nothing. So a lot of things going right for the Winnipeg Jets right now, and they just better hope that guys stay healthy and their top players keep playing like top players. But yeah, so far so good, and that's why I give them an A-.
Yeah, this is a clean sweep here for us, boys. I'm going to give them an A- as well. I just think that some nights they just get right back into, having Hellebuyck having to stand on his head and kind of bail them out. There was a game a couple of weeks ago in Buffalo, and the Sabres were all over them, just throwing a ton of shots at Hellebuyck, and he was just standing on his head in that one. And Winnipeg was actually looking pretty sloppy and a little slow in that game, so I do think they get caught up in that. I am a little surprised about the comments about the lack of depth scoring. I think they have good players in their bottom six, but just there should be more offense there. Like Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, for example, was a really good waiver claim for this team. Not exactly sure where Cole Perfetti is in the lineup, but he's knocking on the door for the scoring lead in all out of all rookies in the NHL this season. So he's really getting close to giving Matty Beniers a run there. And Adam Lowry, another good player on this team. He's their third line center who is having a career season. So I do think there's a little bit more depth there, and we could see some more offense from a few guys, but look, it's a surprise for sure. I think we thought that this team would make some big changes in the offseason, and Cheveldayoff decided to stick with the same group, which, again, was just so surprising after the way last year went. And this team just needed their goaltender to get back to his old self, and he certainly has. Kyle Connor is back to his old self. Pierre-Luc Dubois has really become a star on this team and in the National Hockey League. So things are going right for sure. Case, I think you make a good point. I don't see them finishing second in this division. I mean, you look at Colorado, the way they're going right now, and we're going to talk about them, of course. They could slide up right in there in that second spot. So, but yeah, got to give the Jets an A-. Pretty good given what we thought they were going to be heading into the season.
I will say, while we're on the Jets here, quick, that I went to the game the other night, Toronto and Winnipeg in Toronto, and I was a little bit disappointed, to be honest. It was, I believe it was a 4-1 win over Winnipeg. I'd have to double check. I think it was 4-1. And I thought that game would be perfect to go to in person. Just got some cheap tickets last minute because I thought there was going to be some bad blood there. I thought it was going to be a chippy game. But you know what? Between those two teams on that night, it was pretty tame, and I was a little disappointed. I thought Winnipeg had a little more fight and a little more hatred towards Toronto. I thought it would be a better game, but
it's because the Leafs don't have any sandpaper. They need to add sandpaper at the deadline.
Yeah, 4 more Michael Buntings, please. That would be great.
All right, moving on to the third place team in this Central Division, and that's the Minnesota Wild. 54 points in 45 games. They have lost 2 in a row and have kind of tailed off a little bit as of late. They lost to the Florida Panthers over the weekend, who are trying to survive in the Eastern Conference playoff race. But let's talk about the Minnesota Wild. Bill Guerin's squad. Case, your grade for the Wild.
I've given Minnesota a B here, kind of where we expected them to be, either here or one position lower in the standings. And there's some positives and some negatives to take away from this team. The positives being their defense. They're doing fairly well at just limiting scoring chances in general, like high danger, medium, low, everything, shots, I guess. They play very well in their own zone, and they're the second best in goals against, and that's despite being, I think they are 10th in save percentage in this league. So that speaks to their defense and the scoring chances they're allowed and the rebounds they're allowing, and they're second lowest in high danger shots against. So this team is very good defensively, but the negatives I have is a real lack of scoring depth compared to even Winnipeg, where Kaprizov is the man here, and there's a few other guys, Boldy and maybe Eriksson Ek, but it falls off quick when it comes to scoring goals. They're not getting that depth scoring they had last year, and it's definitely showing. And then the other negative is that this team, their bread and butter, and if I quizzed 100 people, they would say physicality, right? Well, they're not as physical as someone would think. They're 27th in the league in hits. I just thought I had to bring that up because this team has always been the big, scary Minnesota Wild. Well, they're playing defense without hitting somehow, so I guess it's a structure thing. So yeah, I have them at a B here.
I mean, that is surprising because you expect physical teams to rack up a lot of hits, but it could also indicate that they just have the puck more, and that's fine too. But, a big team, you would expect some hits, so that is still surprising to hear that they're 27th in the league. But, Case, I have to say, did you read my notes before, we did this episode? Because that's 2 now in a row where we have the same grade. I also have a B for the Minnesota Wild because, for a lot of the same reasons that you mentioned, I think this is kind of exactly where we thought they would be at this point in the season. They're being carried offensively by Kaprizov, Zuccarello to an extent, Joel Eriksson Ek to an extent, and Matthew Boldy has fit in nicely there offensively. But, they've replaced Kevin Fiala sort of with Matthew Boldy. I think that would be the closest trade-off in terms of offensive production, but it's still not quite enough. I think they still need to do more, whether it's at the deadline or in the offseason, to improve their depth scoring, just to put some more goals in the net, because that's clearly one of their weaknesses right now. When it comes to goaltending, they've gotten pretty above average goaltending from Philip Gustafsson this season, and about average from Marc-Andre Fleury, who also took that brief leave just a week or so ago. And I don't know exactly what the situation is there now, but it seems like they're going to be going to both of them. But goaltending hasn't been an issue this season so far. Like we said, it's kind of been the scoring. They're 22nd in goals for right now among all the NHL teams, and they're top 10 in terms of goals against. So they're still getting good defense, like you mentioned, Case, but they're just not able to score. And they're not getting any help either on the special teams. Both of their special teams are pretty average. So my question that I wanted to ask you guys about this team is sort of like, what do you think they do at the deadline to add offense, if that's what we think they need? And does it involve moving Matt Dumba, who they've been sitting over the last couple games or so?
Yeah, well, we've heard rumors of Matt Dumba to Edmonton, but what piece is Edmonton going to send Minnesota's way for scoring? Edmonton needs scoring themselves. They have 3 guys. But I don't know. It's crazy. I think maybe, there's rumors of maybe looking within the division and going for a Tarasenko route, but they got to do something about scoring, because last year, you had Foligno coming off a career year, same as Hartman. You were getting production from guys like Freddie Gaudreau. Yep. So all of those guys have kind of come back to the mean a little bit, and it's scoring. That's what they have to do at the deadline.
I do think that Guerin takes a big swing at the deadline. I would not be surprised if they're in on Bo Horvat. I think that a player like that would make a ton of sense. They do have some assets. They have some picks. They have some prospects. And I think he's going to do everything he can to try and make this team better because, as we know, next year it gets even worse with their cap situation. They're in cap jail next year, so it's not going to get any easier. So this is kind of a year to go for it if you're the Minnesota Wild, and we know that Guerin is not afraid to make big moves. And going back to the Dumba thing, like you brought up, Chad, he's been very clear that he's not going to trade Matt Dumba unless it makes his team better. So, like, case like you mentioned the Oilers, like it's not like we're going to see a Dumba for Puljujärvi kind of thing or whatever. So we'll see what happens there. But watching them at the deadline, it's going to be interesting to see what they do.
They could be the sneaky team who lands, a Johnny Gaudreau of last year or something. They could land the Bo Horvat, and it wouldn't surprise me. Like, they would be the team
or Timo Meier.
Right. They could be the team that comes in from left field and just puts the right deal together, includes a guy like Matt Dumba and just makes it happen. I could see it.
Yep. For sure. And all right, for my grade for the Minnesota Wild, I'm also giving them a B. And no, I'm not listening to you two chumps and then editing my grades. I'm not doing any of that, I promise. But I'm also giving them a B. So we've got a clean sweep when it comes to our grades for the Minnesota Wild. In my opinion, I think that, yes, they need to add a scorer, very underrated blue line. But I wouldn't mind if they added another goaltender, just to give them some extra insurance. I think that they had a rough start to the season, and then they've been able to climb their way out of it. Now it's things have kind of cooled off a little bit for them. We know that Marc-Andre Fleury is not as consistent as he once was, and Philip Gustafsson is still a young kid learning the waters of the NHL. So if they could pick up an insurance option in net, I think that would be a smart move as well. And a guy in mind, for example, is a former Wild in Alex Stalock, who has actually played pretty well and has a good save percentage with the Chicago Blackhawks. So just something like that while adding some scoring depth for this team. By the way, I think that's a great contract as well for Matt Boldy, and I think that could turn out to be a bargain for this team in the long run. So, yeah, giving the Wild a B.
I think the only reason for them to add a goalie would be if we get an update on the Marc-Andre Fleury situation, or if there's more to that story than we know already. I don't think they need the depth in goal at all. I think they have two capable goalies, and if you look at the surface level numbers and the advanced numbers, they've both been okay. Like I mentioned, Fleury's been about average with his ups and downs, which is fine because he's not going to be your starter come playoff time. It's going to be Philip Gustafsson, who's put together quite a nice season, and I think that's the guy that you have to rely on. So I disagree. I don't think they need a goalie unless there's more to the Fleury story, or if it costs them, the cheap, maybe like a third or a fourth round pick just for some insurance.
Well, fair point, and they're pretty well set up for the future with Jesper Wallstedt as a goalie in their system. So there we go.
And now, a word from our sponsors. This podcast is sponsored by Liquid IV. Whether you're staying active or nursing a hangover, Liquid IV has you covered. Just one stick of Liquid IV in 16 ounces of water hydrates faster and more efficiently than water alone. It contains 5 essential vitamins, B3, B5, B6, B12, and vitamin C, with 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks. It's made with premium ingredients, it's non-GMO, and it's free from gluten, dairy, and soy. There are plenty of awesome flavors, but my personal favorite right now is lemon lime. So get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code boys_in_the_booth at checkout. That's 20% off anything in the store when you order using the promo code boys_in_the_booth at liquidiv.com. Experience better hydration today with Liquid IV. This podcast is also sponsored by the best ticket app out there, SeatGeek. SeatGeek takes the confusion out of buying tickets, making it quick and easy to get the best deals on tickets to your favorite sporting events. Plus, Boys in the Booth listeners get $20 off their first ticket purchase on SeatGeek with the promo code Boys in the Booth in all caps. So click the link in the description down below to download the app, and remember to get your discounted tickets using the code Boys in the Booth in all caps. Get great seats for a fraction of the cost with SeatGeek.
all right, moving on the Minnesota page, moving off of it rather, to the Colorado Avalanche in fourth spot. Man, have they turned things around big time these last few weeks. A point behind the Minnesota Wild now, 53 points in 45 games. They've rattled off 5 wins in a row. They're getting healthier, and I don't think any of us are surprised by the way that the Avalanche have turned things around. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about this team missing the playoffs, and they're not missing the playoffs. That's just not happening. Defending Stanley Cup champions, Case, your grade for the Avs.
Yeah, you would think based off, how I graded Dallas and Winnipeg and Minnesota that I would grade these guys pretty poorly because, fourth in this division is not where we expected to see these guys. But I have still given them a B because they've been pretty damn unlucky this year. And to be 1 point out of a playoff spot, that deserves a B in my mind. When you look at this team, they've struggled to score, and the very clear statistic here is that they're fourth last in goals above expected at minus 15.26 goals, and they're the second lowest shooting percentage in the league. Well, Nathan MacKinnon is back, so that's changed. They've definitely turned things around since he's been back. I know Makar just went down with an injury, but I expect these guys to score a lot more goals now that it isn't only Mikko Rantanen. But yeah, they have a lot of positives that are pointing towards them coming back and being a playoff team and maybe being that second seed. They are up there when it comes to total games lost due to injury, but the stat that really matters here, and that back to that unlucky comment, is that they are fourth in highest in cap hit of injured players. So the players that are missing games are important players. It's McKinnon, it's Landeskog, who is going to be skating after the NHL All-Star break, so he should be back by the end of the year. Francouz, their goaltender, was hurt for a while, so they were running with only Georgiev, who's been a backup in his career. Well, Francouz is back, and he's played great since he's returned. He's my fantasy guy now. I love him. But yeah, and then fourth best in Corsi, and they've been very good defensively so far. They've got the third least goals against despite only having Georgiev, and now have their best goalie back. So that's going to continue. Good defense, scoring, returning, luck evening out. That all points towards this team being a playoff team and probably second in this division.
Yeah, I think they're definitely a playoff team. At the start of the year or in the preseason when we were doing our rankings, we all unanimously had them finishing first in the Central Division. Not that it was a foregone conclusion that they would be the best team in this division, barring any injuries, of course. But, we thought they were good enough to get back to that same spot despite losing some key forwards. Like the one that comes to mind is Nazem Kadri, of course, not having him down the middle anymore. That's not nothing to lose your second line center on the team that just won the cup. So we knew they were going to be good, but then injuries happened, right? Through no fault of their own. They're now sitting below where we expected them to be, in the fourth spot in the Central Division. Monty Puck has them with a 66% chance to make the playoffs. I think, anyone in the hockey world right now, if they were betting people, would bet on the Colorado Avalanche to make the playoffs because they know what this team is made of up and down the lineup. And, that 66%, I think, is almost 99% because this team is pretty damn good and the reigning Stanley Cup champions. So I'm not worried about them, but because they're sitting in fourth and not first, I have to give them a B- just because their outcome right now in the standings is lower than they should be, period. And, you can point to man games lost. You can point to an interesting stat case that I've never heard that you mentioned was the salary loss. That's kind of a cool way to look at it. I've never really heard that before. You can point to all that stuff, but at the end of the day, every team gets unlucky to a certain extent, and great teams are able to battle through that and still make the playoffs. And we're seeing that Colorado now has sort of weathered the storm. And now that McKinnon's back, Landeskog's on his way back, Makar will be back after, about a week or so, maybe in the next few days. They've weathered the storm. It's pretty much over at this point, and they are on a tear. So I'm not worried about Colorado, but because of where they are in the standings, have to give them a B-.
I'll give them a B. I'll go with your grade, Case. I just think that this team is on a roll, and with their recent stretch, that they deserve this grade, and that it wasn't easy, everything that they went through, and again, they're only a point behind Minnesota, so they could certainly pass them, get into third, continue this run that they're on, not necessarily with a bunch of wins in a row, but go 10-2 in their next 12 or whatever. They could certainly do that and really work their way up this division, possibly into second, like you mentioned their Case. So one's very glaring need still for this team, and that is the second line center spot. They've been trying to figure that out all year long, it seems. They've been trying JT Compher, who was very good for them in the playoffs last year, but I think he's more suited in the 3-hole or on the wing. Alex Newhook as well, who has been better lately. He's got 10 goals already on the year. His career high is 13, and so he is set to pass that this season, hopefully. But they will be looking at a center at the deadline for sure, whether it's Jonathan Toews. They would certainly be in on Bo Horvat, no question. So that is a big need for them. And then the goaltending. I think that Georgiev has been all right, but Francouz has always been quietly very good the last few years for this hockey team, and getting a couple of defensemen back would be huge as well. So with the recent stretch and just some of the adversity that they've battled through, it certainly didn't come right away when Nathan McKinnon in particular came back into the lineup, but this has been a really good run when a couple of weeks ago a lot of people were saying that the defending Stanley Cup champions were out of it, and now they're back into it. So B for the Avs.
Couldn't you see the Avs getting a guy like Jonathan Toews, putting him in the second line center position where, on a lot of teams, if you were to acquire Toews for the rumored ask is just a third-round pick, you're likely not playing him second line minutes. But couldn't you see Colorado acquiring him for a second or third-round pick, sticking him in the second line center spot, and getting the absolute most out of that player at this point in his career? Because
Absolutely.
To me, that just seems like exactly what would happen if they get a player like Toews or like a Ryan O'Reilly, for example. Imagine a reunion there between those two.
Hey, it's possible for sure. All right, moving off of the Avs page, and we'll go to we've got 4 more teams in this division, so the final 4 here. We'll move on to the Nashville Predators in the 5th spot, who have gotten themselves back into the race. It's been an up-and-down season for the Preds. 50 points in 46 games so far this season for Nashville. Case, your grade for the Preds.
This team is an enigma. I do not understand what is happening with this team. And analytically, they make no sense at all. Saros, they're completely riding him to this position in the standings right now. But the confusion lies within the expected goals and expected goals against. So they've been incredibly unlucky at minus 20.15 goals above expected for second last in the league. And then they've been incredibly lucky with minus 26 goals against above expected for first in the league. That is just baffling to read those two stats. Like, they've been incredibly lucky for the puck not going in their net and incredibly lucky for, or vice versa. You know what I mean?
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, so that's unbelievable. They're third in save percentage, again, riding Saros once again, having an incredible year. And then this team just has no depth scoring, no scoring. in general. A lot of guys kind of regressing compared to last year. Not terribly. They're still around a point per game, but not having the seasons they had last year. They have poor special teams and just kind of bad analytics across the board. So this team does not make a lot of sense to me. Therefore, I have them as a C- because they're low in the standings, lower than I had them at the beginning of the year. And I think that they've been very lucky to be this high up, which is bad to say when they're fourth last in the Central. But C- for the Nashville Predators.
Yeah, I agree with you, Case. I think they are pretty lucky to be where they are in the standings right now. I gave them a C, so just one grade better than you did. But it's kind of the same old story with this team, right? Like, they're not quite good enough to be a real force in the playoffs anymore, but they're not quite bad enough to tank. So, I mentioned to you guys last week that I want to do an episode where we talk about some of the teams in the middle of the league who maybe should rebuild and what their first moves or their first string of moves should be. And I think Nashville should definitely be in that conversation, despite having some players who are still having some good years. Like UC Saros, of course, is number one on that list. But, dating back to the preseason when we talked about this team, one point kept coming up, and that was the idea of regression from some of their top players. Last season they had players like Forsberg, Yossi, Duchesne, Tanner Jeannot, and some others who are all having, I don't know if they were all career years, but very good years. The first three players that I just mentioned were all above a point per game at the end of the year last year. But this season, they don't have a single one who is above a point per game. So they're just not getting the same kind of offense that they were last year. They're 27th in goals for, and they have the 28th best power play in the NHL right now, which is just not good enough for a team who's trying to make the playoffs. So I don't know if it's, like you mentioned, Case, a lot of unluckiness. I don't know if it is a combination of unluckiness with just regressing a bit to what these players probably should have been after big seasons last year, or what exactly it is. But things aren't going right in Nashville right now, and it seems like if they didn't have an all-star Vezina caliber goalie in UC Saros, they would probably be tanking right now. And I don't know that it's a good thing that they're still in the conversation when this is the deepest year we've seen from a draft in a long time, with Connor Bedard headlining it. So for that reason, I've given them a C. I think, if they were going to keep this roster together and compete, it would have been nicer to see them a bit higher up in the standings at this point. But the fact of the matter is they're sitting in fifth and will likely not make the playoffs, and also not get a very high draft pick. So that's a C from me.
All right, yeah, and talking about the Nashville Predators, hockey is cruel. The NHL is cruel because I think that this team had a very small window to win, and they missed it. They made it to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2017, as we remember, and lost to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And that may have been their only shot. It looks like it. I think that, 2-3 years down the road here, maybe even sooner, this team is going to have to look at a rebuild or retool or whatever. And, some of the roster decisions really stick out like a sore thumb, like losing Eli Tolvanen, for example, who is supposed to be a big part of their team right now and their future moving forward is now finding his game with the Seattle Kraken. So that's just an example, and then some other players that they've missed out on. Tanner Jeannot sticks out to me as a guy who is just not the same as he was last year. This guy was electric. He was in the Calder Trophy conversation, and we've barely heard his name this year when it comes to the Nashville Predators conversation. So I know there's a lot of talk about Ekholm and could he get moved at the deadline? Ottawa is interested. We'll see what happens there. But I'm going to give Nashville a B- because I did expect them to be a lot lower in this division at this point in the season, but they have kind of turned it around. UC Saros really struggled at the beginning of the season. You guys remember that, of course, and he has really turned it around and is just doing everything to help his team win. Also, the backup, Kevin Lankinen, has been decent this year as well for the Predators. But some tough days ahead for this team. We'll see if they can squeak into the playoffs here. It's definitely going to be a bit of an uphill climb. They do have 50 points, so they're only 3 behind Colorado right now, but they're on a heater, and so it's going to be a bit of an uphill climb. But hey, we've been surprised by the Predators before, so right now I'll give them a B-.
3 points this late in the year is tough, and Money Puck's percentages are reflecting that right now. 19% chance for the Preds to make the playoffs as of today. So it could happen, but not likely, and that's a shame if you're a Preds fan.
All right, let's move on to St. Louis as we work through the bottom 3 teams in this division. The St. Louis Blues, what an up and down season for them. They've been up and down like a friggin' yo-yo, man. It's been a crazy season in St. Louis. 49 points in 47 games. They're just a couple of games above 500. We did not see this coming for the St. Louis Blues. Case, your grade for the Blues at this point?
Yeah, I'm going to give the Blues a D. Simply said, I don't have a ton of good things to say about the St. Louis Blues. I'm going to be pretty quick with these last 3 teams in general, to be honest. But St. Louis, the glaring negatives, one of them is goaltending. Binnington has been not good, and the team is also not helping him. They give up a ton of scoring chances, both high danger and medium danger. Their Corsi is all out of whack. They're really not playing well. And when you look at expected goals, both for and against, they're right where they're expected to be, which has them 3rd last in this division. And for me, that makes them a D, because we expected better things out of this team.
Yeah, I think we were right at the start of the year to have some concerns about their goaltending. At the start of the season, we ranked Nashville to finish 2nd and St. Louis to finish 3rd. Now, mind you, when we talked about this division, we said it was going to be close, and we did mention some concerns. And with St. Louis, one of those concerns we had was goaltending. So we were right to think that, because this year, like you guys have both mentioned, it has not been very good. Binnington has been a complete question mark in the net. You never know what kind of goalie you're going to get on any given start, and that's just a problem when you're a team trying to compete. So that hasn't been good. He has a negative 8.2 goals saved above expected, and then Thomas Greiss has been fine, but he's been about average. If you remember, dating back to last year, Binnington and mostly Billy Husso were both pretty good during the regular season, Husso especially, and then when it came to playoff time, Binnington was the guy who took over the crease from Husso. So goaltending, whether good or bad, has kind of been the story of this team, and similar to the Winnipeg Jets, I guess their success sort of ebbs and flows with the type of goaltending they're able to get, and they haven't got any this year. Another concern I had with this team, and the reason that I'm giving them a C- is because there's been a ton of regression, which probably should have been expected when we were talking about this team. Last season, they had 9 players score 20 goals, and we talked about the depth of this team being one of their strengths. This year, it has not been the same story at all. They're 19th in goals for, and they have the 9th most goals against in the NHL right now. So not only are they not scoring, but they're not getting goaltending either, and it's just been a whole mess up and down, top to bottom. And, it's kind of a shame, I guess, if you're a St. Louis fan. But as we get to the bottom of this division, these last 3 teams here, we're going to start talking about Connor Bedard. And so maybe it's the case that it's not that much of a shame if you're a St. Louis Blues fans, because you can sell at the deadline, get some picks in return, and try to get a high pick in this year's draft.
Well, hey, the good thing about the Blues is that they didn't win that long ago, and or they won not too long ago in 2019, of course. But this has been a very up and down season for this hockey team. In my opinion, they're the most inconsistent team in the entire NHL this season. I was high on the Blues. I said this team is built like a playoff team, but they're just not the same team at all that won the Stanley Cup back in 2019. I think that they've lost a bit of their identity. When we think about the St. Louis Blues, we've always thought of them as a team that is hard, physical, in your face, and just covers a lot of the ice. But I think they've lost a bit of that identity, and some of their younger players that have regressed is concerning. We're going to see that with veterans, of course. I mean, we didn't expect Ryan O'Reilly to have the kind of season that he's had, and now he's injured and probably going to get sold off at the deadline along with a guy like Vlad Tarasenko. But it's concerning how much Ivan Barbashev has dropped off this season for this hockey team. I thought he was fantastic for them during their cup run, and was going to be one of the stars on this team. He's really dropped off, and again, Chad, you've brought this up before. I don't understand why they would give Nick Leddy the money that they could have given to David Perron, who was a huge part of that hockey team, huge. And I don't get some of these moves by Doug Armstrong as well. I think that this all falls on him. It's not on Craig Berube. He's a good coach, but he's lost a lot of core pieces of this hockey team the last 3-4 summers, it seems like. Pietrangelo, Perron, Husso. There's 3 names right there. So it's not the same old St. Louis Blues, and that's evident. So I got to give this team a C-.
They weren't going to sign Husso because of the money, but they could have signed Perron if they didn't bring in Nick Leddy, and that to me was the biggest mistake of the offseason. And at the time, we talked about it as that, because it wasn't one of those things where, the player signs and then you think, oh, okay, that might look bad in a couple seasons. The player signed, and on the day of, we were like, okay, well, why didn't you use that money in a different way? We looked at this team, we looked at, their depth and thought they could use another scorer like Perron, and that's evident this season. They can't score goals, guys. That was a brutal move.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, we'll see what happens with the St. Louis Blues, but hearing a lot of trade speculation when it comes to some of their big stars on expiring deals. So there we go. All right, the bottom 2 teams, and of course, this will be quick. These 2 teams are right in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes, as we know. And we'll start with the Arizona Coyotes. Got the ball cap on, 7th spot in this division, 35 points in 47 games, and it's been a rough stretch for Andre Tournier and company as of late. 2-8 in their last 10. They've played a ton of road games, obviously, which is, I think, had a big impact on this team. So let's get our grades for the Arizona Coyotes. Case.
If I could rank their last 10 games, I would rank them an A+. But we're ranking the first half of the season, and for that reason, I'm going to give the Arizona Coyotes a B for Bedard. They've got the 4th best odds in winning the draft lottery this year, and honestly, they've played some fun games occasionally. Every once in a while, they spoil a top team, and it's a lot of fun to watch. So, yeah, I got to give them a B. And, the negatives is basically everything for this team, so I'm not even going to touch on that. I'll move on to Chad.
It's basically everything, he says. I'm going to give them a B+ here, Case, because they, like you mentioned, have the 4th best odds as we speak to get Connor Bedard first overall in the upcoming draft, a 9.8% chance. And I think, they've found some nice surprises from players on their rosters who on their roster who could be valuable at the deadline. I'm thinking of guys like Lawson Krause, Nick Ritchie, Karel Vejmelka, if they don't want to extend him further. So I feel like they have some players who they'll be able to get even more value from at the deadline, and that means they'll get even worse and even closer to Connor Bedard. The second thing I wanted to say about this team is that, kind of like you mentioned, they've been playing some good hockey at times this year, and I think they showed that, they can be competitive in this league, maybe even as soon as next year. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I think Harp, I think you and I have been beating the Arizona drum too much here in case he's going to get upset. He thinks we're nuts. But, listen, we've talked a lot about Jacob Chychrun and Ghost Despair, and they could keep both of those players and genuinely compete next season with all of the players that they have up front, and that's if you add a Connor Bedard to the mix, because how good would that be to have him on this already good young team? It would just be exciting. So I'm giving them a B+ because they're in a great spot right now to get that first overall pick, and they've shown some they've had some fun this year and shown that they can compete.
I'll give the Coyotes a C+, because exactly what you guys said previously. They've been fun to watch at times, and I think they've been better than expected a little bit. I think that they play really hard for Andre Tournier, their head coach, and he gets a lot out of them. And they've identified their core, which in my opinion is a pretty good one at that. The Kellers and the Schmaltzes and the Krauses, and J.J. Moser is turning into a fantastic defenseman. They've got Logan Cooley, and adding a Bedard or a Fantilli or a Leo Carlson, whoever, into that mix would just be unbelievable. So, and Chad, going back to your, some of the deadline targets on this team, Krause I don't think will be one. He signed a long-term extension in the summer, but I'll throw another name out at you who's been a nice fit on this team. He's been their first-line center at times this year, who could go at the deadline for as high as a second-round pick, and that's Nick Bjugstad. He's been a really nice fit for this team. Again, I'll go back to our 2023 bold predictions episode when I said that I really think that they should extend Shane Gostisbehere rather than trade him. I like the idea of them keeping him and Chychrun. And again, this team is going to get a high pick at the draft, of course, even if it's not Bedard. I think Fantilli, for example, a centerman with size. We know that Bill Armstrong likes guys with size. He would be a great fit even, and they're doing it right, and it's not going to be long before they are a playoff team. So I really like what Arizona's doing. They're going through the rebuild, rolling with the punches. It'll be interesting to see what they do at the deadline. They've been a little better than expected. So yeah, giving them a C+. All right, our final team in the Central Division, and these guys have been good lately. The Chicago Blackhawks, 32 points in 45 games, 3 points below the Arizona Coyotes, of course, but a surprising 6-4 in their last 10 games. So if they keep this up, they'll be taking themselves out of the race for that number one pick, but they're very much still in it, a little bit more than the Arizona Coyotes. They've got the third best odds right now to win the draft lottery. So let's finish up with the Chicago Blackhawks case.
Yeah, I'm also going to give them a B for Bedard. They have even better odds than the Arizona Coyotes. That's why I gave them the same rank, because the Coyotes also showed a bit of promise, making them a B, so it kind of equals out. Better odds, little promise, BB. This team is another team that I'm going to be watching closely when it comes to the trade deadline, because I think there's a ton of depth players on this team that playoff teams could eat up and trade a lot of picks Chicago's way. And I'm just kind of happy that this team is embracing the rebuild, and they're bad. They're in the bottom 5 in almost every analytic there is. It's just not good. Although they have been good in the last 10 games, but like, you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, all you got to do is play Peter Mrazek a bit more, I think, and you'll lose more games. But my God, guys, like, what was it, last week or the week before, where they gave up 6 goals on 7 shots between Mrazek and who is the other guy? Who do you even remember who the second guy in was? Was it Stalock? Is that who it is?
I don't think he was playing that game, was he?
No, it was a Jackson Stauber, I believe it is. They called him up from Rockford. I believe that's the name of the other goaltender.
Okay. Anyways, that's like, I just thought that was funny to bring up. Like, play Mrazek more, you'll lose more games. You'll get Connor Bedard, you know. But a 12.9% chance right now, third best in the NHL, to get Connor Bedard at that number 1 overall pick. I'm giving them a B, just below the Arizona Coyotes, because, like you mentioned, Case, they haven't really shown any promise this year. And let's be honest, I don't think anyone on this team right now, aside from, you know, maybe Seth Jones and maybe a couple others, are even going to fit the timeline that this team envisions itself being competitive. So it's not a knock to say that they haven't shown any promise this year, because no one's going to be around when the real team is assembled, and that includes Taves, Kane, probably a couple defensemen like Jake McCabe and Connor Murphy, and then a couple forwards like Max Domi, Andreas Athanasiou. Like, what you should do at the deadline if you're Chicago is just get as much as you can for all of those players and just continue the tank, cross your fingers, and hope you get the first overall pick.
Yeah,
but
they're going to be the Ice Hogs after the deadline for sure. Yeah. It was Stalock, by the way. I looked.
Was it? Okay, I wasn't sure,
okay.
But
thank you.
Yeah, but thank you for that. But anyways, Chicago, 8th spot in the division, pretty much right where we thought they would be. But for me, that's a B, because they have a good shot at getting Connor Bedard.
Yeah, I like that. B's for Bedard for the Yotes and the Blackhawks, but I'm going to give these guys a C, so a little bit below, because Kyle Davidson is making it quite obvious with some of his roster decisions that they are, quote-unquote, tanking for Connor Bedard. Lucas Reichel, one of their best prospects, he gets called up after being a point per game, now over a point per game in the American Hockey League. He has 4 points in 3 games, and they send him back down. And, that includes other players like Soderblom, the young goaltender, Ian Mitchell, young right shot defenseman, and maybe a few others in there. But, when I look at teams that could use that franchise player the most, it would be the Chicago Blackhawks, just because they're likely to lose one or both of their 2 cornerstone players that won them 3 Stanley Cups and other pieces as well. By the way, Max Domi has been a great fit there. He's had a really good season in Chicago, and very happy for Luke Richardson. But yeah, we expected this from Chicago. They've been fun to watch lately. But I have to give them a little bit below what you guys are, just because Kyle Davidson is making it obvious here.
I mean, can you blame him, really?
No, and that's the thing too. Like, on the contrary, I can't blame him. It's Bedard is that good, and this draft is that good. So,
Harp, are we ready for Fantasy Corner? Because I have a trade to announce.
You're now listening to the Fantasy Corner right here on the Boys in the Booth podcast.
Okay, all right, yeah, we'll get right into Fantasy Corner now, and all right, Chad, be our trade breaker here. What do you got?
I have a trade to announce between the Dirty Birdies and no regret skis. Okay, that's Jeffrey and Dylan. The Dirty Birdies acquire Cale Makar and Elias Lindholm in exchange for none other than Connor McDavid.
Oh,
Wow.
Guys, what the... I'm just seeing this now. I promise this just went through, or hasn't gone through, but it's pending approval. No shot this doesn't get vetoed, right? Like, this definitely gets vetoed for Connor McDavid. He has like 100 more points than second place in the league right now.
yeah, that's pretty crazy. I'm gonna have
That's
to look
worse
deeper
than
into that.
my trade from earlier in the season.
I'm with you, Case. I'm gonna have to look into this too. But Connor McDavid, ranked number 1 in the league. I know Cale Makar is the second best ranked defenseman in fantasy right now, but my God, I don't know. That's a tough one. But anyways, sorry, Harper. How about we kick it off normally then after that breaking news?
Yeah, geez, that's shocking. You'll have to look at that a little closer. Talk to both parties, but anyway, yeah, we'll get into Fantasy Corner the right way here. Case, tell us how you did last week, and who you've got up against you this week.
Just quickly, that's rank 40 and 41 in the league in terms of fantasy points for. I'll call it like negative 40 in Connor McDavid because he's so far in first place that like it's not fair to just say first place.
Yeah.
I had a great week last week. I played No Regretski, who is in this trade for McDavid. He's ranked third in the league, and I beat him 212.35 to 194.10. He had a pretty ridiculous trade go through last week too, trading UPL for Tyler Seguin, and I was shocked no one said anything about that trade, and then I was livid when Tyler Seguin that night got 2 goals and an assist for Dylan. I was so pissed, but I had production across the board coming from everyone. My dogs were Krejci, Montour, Heiskanen, and McKinnon, 34.25 points. So I beat Dylan. That felt real good, and now this week I'm playing Cameron Murray, North Korea, and he's kicked off pretty hot with Willie Nylander, but my Patrick Laine was my call at 2 goals and assists last night, so it's going to be a tight one between him. He right now is projected higher than me.
Yeah, well, Willie Nylander, 4-point period actually for the Leafs last night against the New York Islanders, but he's not an all-star. Like, riddle me that, guys. Leading the team in goals and points. But anyways, to fantasy, I beat Book Hockey last week in a week that was tighter than I initially thought it was going to be. It was projected to finish 243 to 187 in favor of me, but it ended up finishing 218 to 188, and that was after I made 3 moves on the week. So I was doing my best to stay caught up and make sure that I won this week to keep my record intact. But yeah, it was a bit of a close one. And Book Hockey, although he's not in a great place in terms of league standings right now, has a pretty solid squad, and I think has just gotten unlucky matchups, and I believe he has the most points against in the entire league right now. So it's been a
pretty
tough go
solid
for him.
squad if you don't look at his back end.
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of forwards, and he's been a bit unlucky too, like Evander Kane, not having him for so long, that was kind of tough. But like I said, most points against in the league, I believe, so that's a tough go. I have Brad Marchand, Timo Meier, and Seth Jones all have over 26 points for me last week, so that was great. Even though Seth Jones playing on a Chicago, he plays a ton, and he's out there for every play. So if Chicago scores, he's likely involved in it, whether it's getting hits or blocks or actually getting points on plays. So that was great. This week, I'm facing up against Nathan Gagne's team, and it looks to be like a rout as of right now. It's projected to finish 222 to 135, so I'm not overly worried about this week. week 18, so we're currently in week 16, so in 2 weeks from now, this will be a difficult week for me. I'm playing Kuznetsov's third line, who is currently undefeated. So it could be the case that we're seeing a 17-0 team face a 16-1 team, and we'll be battling for first place. So I'll be keeping my eye on week 18. But for now, I'm kind of chilling in fantasy. How about you, Harp?
Well, this has been the most fun I've had in fantasy because right now the Sunnyvale hockey team is staying in a pretty tight playoff race right now in our fantasy hockey league. A big win for me last week to move up to 9-6, 175 to 150 over Will Nye the Science Guy, and two big performers for me, both on teams who are red hot right now. Arturi Lehkonen, 21.5 fantasy points, and Zach Hyman, an absolute monster for me in fantasy last week, 36 points. He had 4 points in that win over Vancouver on Saturday, and he had 9 points last week. So very happy to have Zach Hyman of the Edmonton Oilers, and looking to keep it rolling this week against our good buddy Jake McKenzie, who is certainly down the rankings at 3-12, but he's crushing me at the moment and is projected to have more points. So looking forward to the rest of that matchup and trying to continue to rise up the ranks here and get into the playoffs.
A bunch of teams in the middle, like I pointed out at the start of the week. Teams between 4 and 10 all have the same record of 9-6-0, and not a ton of total fantasy points separates 4th spot and 10th spot. So it's going to be a great race for the playoffs. And I know we've got a lot of runway left, but it's just interesting to point out how tight the league currently is. Really up until the 13th spot. We've got teams, the 4th place team 9-6-0 and 13th place team 8-7-0. So it's really, really tight in the middle there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Chad, do you want to give us the standings before we wrap up?
Sure. I'll just do top 5 and bottom 5 quick. Kuznetsov's third line in first, myself in second, Noah Gretzky's in third, who just got Connor McDavid, I guess, and Jeffrey actually likes it. He talked about it in the chat, if you guys take a look at that.
It's Morrissey and McDavid for Marner, Makar, and Lindholm.
Wait, is there a second trade that went through?
That's what Jeff's saying.
Okay, well, I'll have to keep an eye on that. And speaking of Jeff, he's in 4th place, the Dirty Birdies, and then Poppy's Milk in 5th. Bottom 5 teams, Connor McDavid's in 16th. I took the walk to Poland in 17th. Mail Order Brides in 18th. Jake's Slam Dunk team. Jake, if you're listening, I sent you a couple trade requests. I saw that you were on the app today, so maybe reply to those. And Eichel Tower in 20th, who has yet to win a week. So those are the standings, top 5 and bottom 5 in the Boys in the Booth Fantasy Hockey League on Yahoo.
All right, another good episode here, boys. Episode 156, talking about the Central Division, and we'll move on to the Eastern Conference next week as we continue our mid-season report cards. Again, a little bit past the midway mark of the season, but next week, looking forward to episode 157, giving our mid-season grades for teams in the Metro. So get ready for that one, Case. Looking forward to it. All right, thanks so much for listening. Enjoy the rest of the hockey this week as we get closer to the NHL trade deadline, and we'll talk to you again next week. Cheers.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details. And don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at patreon.com/boysinthebooth.